All right, so we are starting our last and final section of Unit 2A. Woo! 2A.6, solving absolute value equations and equalities. So we'll be working on this until we get through. We're going to start off, I've broken into three parts. So we're going to start with part one today. So part one is going to be, like I said, in your handy dandy notebook. It's going to be titled 2A.6, Part 1, Solving Absolute Value Equations. If your notebook is not together or in an order that you're happy with, you can always just do it on a plain piece of notebook paper and then glue it in your notebook later, right? Huh? 71. Yep. So if your notebook is not where you need it to be, then just do it on a paper and then organize it later, okay? All right, on this page, you're going to divide it into quarters. So you're going to divide it in half horizontally and divide it in half quarters. So you should have your whole page like has little lines and pretend that's all whatever. You know what a notebook paper looks like. The dots are on this side, right? Typically. And you're going to just divide it in half and then divide it in half so that you have 4 quarters. And you should write your title. Okay. So I'm going to tell you every time we go to a box to change. Does that make sense? So we're going to start off in box 1. If you can't see, you can always click on the link from your agenda page or from your modules so that you can see the words as well, to make sure you're comfortable viewing, or if you write a little slower, you have access to it. Does that make sense? All right, so in box 1, we're going to write the definition. Our definition that we're writing is absolute value measures the distance of a number from 0. For example, well, for absolute value of x equals a is greater than 0, meaning that a has to be positive. Okay, a has to be positive. Okay, and so because of that, you're going to end up with 2 solutions. It's going to be x equals a positive or x equals negative a. All right, I'll give you a moment to write this down. So now we're going to move into box 2. In box 2, we have steps to solve the absolute value equation. Now, our steps are kind of lengthy. However, we're going to talk about how do we paraphrase, meaning how can I pull out the important stuff and still make sure I'm writing the right things down. All right. So up first, it says to isolate the absolute value expression. So step 1, the key word here is isolate. The step 1 is to isolate. So keyword here is to isolate. Step 2 is write 2 equations. So step 2, you're writing 2 equations. You're going to create 2 equations. One that is positive solution and one that has a negative solution. Okay. Step 3 is to solve. And then step 4 is to check our work. Okay, this is kind of similar to like any problem solving guide that you would normally use, where you have to make sure you understand what you're working with, make a plan, which is your 2 equations, solve, and always check yourself, because that's the beauty of math, right? The beauty of math is that we can always plug in and see if we're right. Okay? Extraneous solutions are answers that don't work in the original problem. Don't work in the original problem. Okay? And that's because if your solution is the vertex. Does that make sense? So if it's the vertex of the absolute value, that's when that's going to happen. All right. No solution when the absolute value is equal to a negative number. So if my problem starts off being equal to a negative number, guess what? No solution. Because is there at any point is a absolute value going to ever produce a negative? No, it's not. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. So I'll pause and give you a moment to choose to write down what you feel is important. Okay, so we're going to now put the steps used. So again, Main thing, isolate. Then we're going to create two equations, a positive and a negative. Then we're going to solve. Then we're going to check. Got it? Isolate, two equations, positive, negative, solve, check. Isolate, two equations, positive, negative, solve, check. Okay? All right. And your third box, my friends, is our first example. So up first, we have the absolute value of 2x minus 5 equals 9. So we have the absolute value of 2x minus 5 equals 9. Okay? Step one says to isolate. So meaning that you want to make sure that your absolute value is on a side by itself. Is our absolute value isolated? Yes or no? Yes, it is. There's nothing there. Okay? So after we isolate, step two says we're going to separate, right? We're going to create two equations. Two equations, meaning that we're taking away the absolute value. Because when you think about absolute value, remember it makes a V. And there's a side that has a positive slope and there's a side that has a negative slope. We're going to create those two equations. One with a positive slope and one with a negative slope. But we're not talking about slope. We're just talking about one's positive and one's negative. So when I break this off, I'm going to have 2x minus 5 equals positive 9. And I'm going to solve 2x minus 5 equals negative 9. That's what step two is telling you to do. How do we feel about step two? Good? All right, step three, now just exactly how you did your do now. Get x by itself. What do I need to do to solve to get x by itself? And it's going to be the same steps for each one, right? So what are the two steps that it's going to take for me to get x by itself here? I'm going to do what? I'm going to do what? I'm going to do what? Add. Inverse operations. The opposite of subtracting is adding. So I'm going to add 5. Gone. Then what's the last thing I got to do? Huh? Divide, because the opposite of multiplication is. So notice that I'm doing this shorthand because at this point in our lives, should we be able to quickly do this? In theory, yes. All right, what's 9 plus 5? 14. 14 divided by 2? 7. So one answer is 7. The same steps that I did there, I'm going to do here again. So we're going to add 5. Done. Divide by 2, because the opposite of multiplication is division. So now we know x equals, what is negative 9 plus 5? Negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Okay. All right. Step 3, solve. We're done, right? Nope. Step 4 is to check, right? So we're going to out loud check. Here we go. Checking means that you're going to take these values and plug them back into the original for x. So 2 times 7. 14. 14 minus 5. Absolute value of 9 is? Oh my gosh, we're geniuses. That worked. All right, next one. Negative 2. 2 times negative 2 is? Negative 4. Negative 4 minus 5 is? If you owe me $4 and you ask me for another $5, how much do you owe me now? Negative 9. And what is the absolute value of negative 9? 9. So what does that tell us? Geniuses. We did it. Good job. Now, were those 4 steps that bad? No, you just wanted to say that. I know you did. All right. Let's try it again. And then don't worry. It's going to be your turn. So we're moving on to box 2. All right. So now we're in box 2. So in box 2, you have 3 absolute value, x plus 4 equals 15. Okay. Step 1 tells us to do what? Isolate. Is this isolated? No. So who do I need to get rid of? The 3. This is multiplication. So how am I going to get rid of that 3? Division, divide. The opposite of multiplication is division. So now we're left with the absolute value of x plus 4 equals, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. All right. Step 1, are we now isolated? Yes. Step 2 tells us to do what? Create the two equations. So we now have x plus 4 equals positive 5. And we have x plus 4 equals negative 5. What do I need to do to isolate my x? Subtract 4. Luckily, this is just a one-stepper, right? So all we have to do is subtract 4. 5 minus 4 is? Guys, y'all should have said that quicker. 5 minus 4? And loud. 5 minus 4? That I guess that's the best we're going to get, huh? All right. Negative 4 minus 4. Negative 4 minus 5. Okay, what is it? Negative 9. Okay. Now we solve. Step 4 says we should do what to make sure we did it right? Check. Plug it in. So we go back to the original. So 1 plus 4 is 5. Absolute value of 5 is 5 times 3 is, oh my gosh, we're geniuses. All right. Next one. Negative 9. Negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5. Absolute value of negative 5 is 5 times 3 is, oh my gosh, we did it. Bam. So smart. All right. So what are you going to do? Here you go. This is going to be your exit ticket, your way of showing your knowledge that you got this in your groups. I'm going to come around and you have strips of cards that have a problem on it. And then you have strips that have the answers on it. And you're going to group the answers to the correct card. Okay. The group that gets it done the fastest will get a prize. But everyone else still continue to work because we want to make sure you got it. As you're working it, ask for help. You can work the problems in the back of your notebook or on the same note page if you have some space. Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to come around and then we're going to go. In my hand.